So again, just for the tape, I'm just going to say we're going to start again at the beginning of Perek Kaf Aleph. Ben 12 shana Menashe b'malcho. Menashe was 12 when he became the king. V'chamishim v'chamesh shana malach b'Yerushalayim, and he reigned for 55 years. And as I mentioned, we had this whole discussion as to why he lived that long or reigned that long if he was so bad a human being. V'shem imo Chevtzibah. That was his mother's name. Vayas hara b'nei Hashem. He did evil in the eyes of God. K'to'avot hagoyim asher horish Hashem mipnei b'nei Yisrael. He did exactly the abominations the nations had been doing who had lived in Israel prior to them being thrown out of the land, both in time Yehoshua and then later on, and which was Dafka warned by Hashem not to be like them. Okay, let's pick it up now in Pasuk Gimel. This is where we left off in the reviewing, starting again of the parak. Vayashav vayiben et habamot. He went again and rebuilt Bamot. Asher yibad Chizkiyahu aviv. We noted that Chizkiyahu in the prior parak did something that seems that no king was able to succeed in doing before him, and that was he eradicated the private altars, which were not permitted once the first Beit HaMikdash was built. Also, these altars in the time of Chizkiyahu that he eradicated, for the most part, were used for service of Hashem, but they were prohibited because there was a central location to go to, known as the Beit HaMikdash. The Bamot the one he's reestablishing, could have been, there are differences of opinions, could have been just Bamot that were going to be still used for service of Hashem and or Avodah Zarah. Vayakem Mizbechot leBaal, he established Mizbechot, separate Mizbechot for Baal, Vayas Asherah, and he also he made an Asherah tree, Avodah Zarah, Kasher Asa Achav Melech Yisrael, just like Achav, king of Israel, had done. Vayishtachu l'chol tzva shamayim vayavod otam, and he bowed down to all the hosts of the heaven, and he worshipped them. Again, a fine man. Okay, let's take a look at the first slide from the Dat Sofrim. It says Vayashov vayiven et habamot. Very at the beginning it says Baal meretz haya Menashe. Avodah rabba avad lakim al tilam et kol mosdot hapulchan shel avodah zarah. He put in a tremendous amount of effort to reestablish this whole cult approach of avodah zarah. All the different institutions of avodah zarah. I'm using that like not buildings per se, but whether they were the idols, whether they were the bamot and everything else. Bivadai ram levavo, definitely he became very haughty. Kasher ma'asav hitzlichu, when he saw himself being successful. V'avru alav esrot shanim shel malchut shalva, and he made all these altars, he made all this avodah zarah, he worshipped them, he promulgated the concept of avodah zarah, and things were peaceful. There wasn't hellfire and brimstone raining down on him, so cool, let's just keep going. B'simcha rabba v'vadai hodeh le'elilav al hasegav. He for sure, with great joy, thanked his idols for his great accomplishments. He saw himself, as in modern terms, say he was a genius. Like, look what kind of great guy I am. I built all these altars. I built all those avodah zarah. I worship them. It's quiet. Hey, piece of cake. He then became the quintessential example of a successful Rasha in his own eyes, and also in the eyes of his generation who was passing through. And on the other hand, he was a symbol or a sign, an example of failure in all future generations. What does that mean? If we were to transport ourselves right now to the time of Menashe, the middle of his reign, with all the avodah zarah that was there and everything else, and things are peaceful, we say, hey, this guy's onto something, because, maybe since Shlomo HaMelech it hasn't been this quiet. I don't know, maybe he's pretty successful. Okay, fine, he serves avodah zarah, but he also serves God, and maybe this is cool. So we would look at him possibly as a dugma ishit, and someone we should emulate, someone like that. But now with hindsight, we know what kind of Rasha he really was, and what damage he did to Am Yisrael ad kedei kach, that because of him, again, we have to qualify this as we get closer to the end of the book, the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. Then we say that they become a sign of, or an example of failure in the eyes of future generations. That the personality, the persona of Menashe itself becomes a warning of the various tremendous amounts of possibility of mistakes and people who cause people to mistake. Now, the book of Yirmiyahu, Perek Mem Daled, the people are being told by Yirmiyahu, you're doing the wrong things. You have foreign wives and you're serving Avodah Zarah and on and on and on and on. They say, oh, listen up, Jeremiah. Enough. Chalas. We don't want to hear from you because we're going to do everything we said we were going to do. We're going to worship. We're going to bring incense to the Queen of Heaven. And we're going to bring libations to her. Kasher asinu anachnu, as we have already done. Va'avotenu, and our forefathers did. So they make reference in Sefer Yirmiyahu to this tkufa, to this time period where they were off the deep end in the way they were serving Hashem, or rather not serving Hashem, and instead were serving idols. Something popped into my head. Wait 1 second. I said, talk about the Kishalon, talking about the... Okay, if it's that important, it'll come back to me. Okay, let me move you over here and take you off the screen share. Let's continue. Okay, let's look now. I want to just read something. I also, for those of you who have at home, the, what's it called? Dat Mikra. The Dat Mikra on Tanakh. I'm going to read just one. I'm not going to make I didn't make a slide of it. I just will read something to you. It says, when he talks about the fact that he put up Mizbachot for Baal. Remember, we said he made Bamot. He made private altars, and potentially it was Avodah Zarah, potentially it was for service of Hashem, but potentially it was for both of them. But then it says he established, he placed altars for Baal. I'm just going to read one sentence. He said, Yachid hu Menashe ben kol malchei Yehuda. He was unique. He was the only king among all the kings of Yehuda, shemeforash bo she'ekim mizbeach leBaal, who said that he himself placed an altar for Baal. V'chach halach be'ikvot Achav. He went in this, by doing so, he went in the ways of Achav. If you remember Achav, actually his wife, Izebel, introduced Baal to the country. Okay, they made the Asherah tree and everything. Okay, let's continue. Okay, Pasuk Daled, number 4. Uvana mizbechot beveit Hashem. He built altars in the house of God, i.e. the Beit HaMikdash. Asher amar Hashem b'Yerushalayim asim et shemi. Who Hashem said, I will place my name there. I briefly mentioned last week, and it bears repeating this week, but I'll say it a little differently this week. I have made reference over the years to the rockabye baby syndrome. Rockabye baby syndrome is as follows. It's not my original thought. I heard this from, I can't remember his name. I can hear his voice, but I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. The rockabye baby syndrome, he says is as follows. You know, there's growing up, many sang or read a nursery rhyme to their kids, rockabye baby in the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby cradle no. When you really listen to those words, they're horrible. Talking about a baby falling out of a tree. That's a horrible thing to be saying to a baby, even though they don't understand it. And how does that apply? Let's take a look for a moment at Akedat Yitzchak. When we come to the parasha, and Hashem says to Avraham Avinu, he wants to take et bincha et chidcha et Yitzchak v'aleo sham le'olah. Take your firstborn son, your son Yitzchak, the one that you love, and bring him up on the mountain of Har Moriah, and he doesn't say Har Moriah, that place, and you're gonna kill him there. You're gonna sacrifice him. It's human sacrifice. And we listen to the laning, or we read the Rashi, or we prepare the parsha a little bit, and we say, yeah, we know the end of the story. He's not going to kill him. But in the moment, what we have forgotten is what God has actually asked of Abraham. to take his firstborn son and to kill him. And this happens throughout Tanakh, in Torah and in Navi. We know the end of the story in most cases, and therefore we're not shaken when we hear it. We know that there's going to be the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash at the end of this of Sefer Melachim. We know it's going to be destroyed. There's going to be this last gasp of Jewish dominion with the governor whose name is Gedaliah ben Achikam, who we're going to learn about. He's the Tzon Gedaliah man. But for the most part, we know where this is heading. So when we hear these things, it was in the Beit HaMikdash, we know because destroyed, blah, 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 blah. So it's the rockabye baby thing again, because we hear this and we should really be shaken by the fact that a king of Israel, and I know we've seen plenty of rotten kings, some very good ones and some very rotten ones, but you're talking the worst of the worst at the moment, Menashe, who according to the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, I said, the Menashe en lo chelek l'olam haba, that he doesn't have a place in the world to come. But what he did, he went into the Beit HaMikdash, something we daven 3 times a day minimum for, and he brought in Avodah Zarah, and he brought in more than Avodah Zarah. We're going to see in a minute something from the Malbim on Pasuk when we get to it, to Pasuk Zion. I'm saying it out loud so I don't forget. Just the extent to which this particular Avodah Zarah was that he brought into the Beit HaMikdash. So yes, when we learn about the destruction over the next few weeks, it should bother you, but this should bother you tremendously as well. It's important. And that's why you learn Sefer Melachim also, some of the good and the bad and unfortunately the ugly in this case. Okay, let's continue. Hey, number 5. It wasn't enough that he worshipped the sun, the moon, the stars, etc., but he also built altars for them. There was an inner courtyard, an outer courtyard, and in both of them, he decided to make multiple and cover his bases and make them all over the place. In addition to that, he passed his son through fire, and we said last week this is the service of Molech, where they would pass a child not actually through the fire per se, although some say yes, but here they say that he took his son and passed him through columns of fire, which was the service of Molech. This is all in forms of divinations and necromancy, and using, or they would take a bone and put it in their armpit and speak through the bone, and trying to raise the dead and all this other shtuyot. All these things are a laundry list of exactly what it says in the Torah are asur to be done. When it comes to imitating the goyim, like the people of the Amori, the Mitzrim, and others, it's the onen and menachesh of yidoni mavir beno ba'esh. The pasuk obviously in the Aseret HaDibrot, where it says he should be looking up to the heavens and be looking at to worship those objects in the heavens, and he did these all lasot hara b'nei Hashem, to do evil in the eyes of God, l'hachis, to anger him. Now, last week when we came to this pasuk, I stressed the idea that he wasn't doing this because he just liked it. He did it l'hachis, to anger God. And we're going to look in a minute at one of the commentaries about this. Somewhere I have it. We'll see if it's on the screen. But Aryeh, if you'd like to share with everybody what you said to me about this, because I was saying, how in the world does a person like Menashe get to such a point with a father like Chizkiyahu? So if you want, you're more than welcome. I'll unmute you you have to unmute yourself though and share with what you said to me, please. You know how to unmute yourself? There you
go. Issues around. I have seen people who have gone out on projects to save the world and forgot to pay attention to their children. Okay? And the children grow up resenting their parent. Unfortunately, I've seen that a lot. His father was granted 15 more years, and you said he did all kinds of build this, that, and the other thing. But you can't build this and that and the other thing and also pay attention to your kid. I think that the kid was ignored, and he did this to get back at his father. Okay,
Mhm.
that's what I have to say.
Okay. In addition to that, you also made, and you and I made a connection between this and the story of Eliah Kohen. For those of you who remember early on in Sefer Shmuel, I think it's Perek Gimel, Eliah Kohen is so busy raising Shmuel, who becomes Shmuel HaNavi, that his two sons, Chofni and Pinchas, are pretty much forgotten about by him, and they end up doing some terrible things. So I think it's a similar idea. And now I want to show the other side of the coin. I just thought about this now. Otherwise, I'd jump up and grab the Rambam to show you the text. But let me just tell you off the top of my head. Years ago, I took a course, I think it's 3 days, with Rabbi J.J. Schachter. So I know some of you know him, and I know I've quoted him a few times over the years. And in this class, he made reference to a Rambam. I believe it's in Hilchot Tshuva or Deot. I forgot where. I'd have to go looking for it. It talks about Avraham Avinu. And it says in there that Avraham, as we know, was megayer et anashim. Avraham was busy converting men. Sarah megayeret et nashim, and Sarah would convert the women. To the point, it says in the Rambam that there were rivavot, there were tens of thousands of people. Until I saw that Rambam, I never thought, okay, for a few hundred people, tens of thousands of people that Avraham and Sarah converted to Judaism. Now, why is that so significant that that's mentioned in the Rambam? So the Rav Schachter said like this: where are those 10,000? Do we hear a peep, a single word about any one of those? And the answer is no. Whom do we hear about? Yitzchak and Yaakov, etc. He had his head on his shoulders. He understood the exact opposite of what's going on here and what happened in the story of Eliah Kohen. He knew that even though he's involved in tzibur, he's involved in the conversion, he's involved in people's lives and everything else, he could not forget what's the most important thing in his life. And that was the fact that he had a son named Yitzchak, and that had to come first before everything. Everything else he did L'Shem Shamayim, Hashem wanted him, he did the Giyur and everything else, but we know nothing about those people. It's all about his son Yitzchak and his grandson Yaakov. And he says, that is the way you raise your family. Exactly what Ari was saying, as the opposite when it came to Abraham and Yitzchak. So let's take a look. Oh, I do know what I was going to do here. Okay. Okay. So I'll mention something that I don't know if I made a slide for. If I didn't, I'll just tell you. Just take a quick look here. Yeah, I did. Okay. Let me share the screen.
That's a great thing.
All right.
Grasping the gravity of what you said, it just shows how great our forefathers were, that they were able to accomplish so much and to bring up children worthy of the service.
100%. We can't conceive of their greatness. You're right. It's impossible. The challenges that they had to have had were astronomical. And the fact that they could focus on what was truly important and what was secondary was critical to the growth of the beginning of Am Yisrael. That's very good. Now, mention one thing here that's interesting from the Dat Sofrim. He points out a point that I completely didn't even think of. The Ov and Idonim were like sorcery and trying to use divination to find out things. You know, we forget something. He had this ability already. Look what it says. He used the Ov and Idonim for the purpose of divining the future. Benevi'im lo sha'al. He didn't ask the Nevi'im what was going to be. Uvurim lo ne'aneh. And he wasn't answered if he did ask the Urim v'Tumim. Ubekesh tzachad be'ovot u'v'idonim. What did he do? He had tools available to him. He had Nevi'im to whom he could have turned to ask what to do about certain things. And had he been properly acting, he would have had the Urim v'Tumim to ask as well. And he put those aside and he substituted it for the Ov and Idonim. Okay. Let's come back to here in a minute. Let's go back to the next pasuk. Pasuk. Where are we on here? Oh, Zion. Okay. Vayasem et pesel ha'ashera asher asa. He put the idol of the Asherah tree that he made, babayit, in the house, the Beit HaMikdash. Asher amar Hashem el David ve'el Shlomo v'no, about which Hashem told David and Shlomo, babayit hazeh, in this house, u'v'Yerushalayim asher bacharti mikol shivtei Yisrael, and in Jerusalem, from the place that I chose from all other tribes of Israel, asim et shemi leolam. This pasuk is one of those that should also make you tremble. Because again, he is taking an idol, and we're going to see in a minute something the Malbim says about this idol, and he's placing this particular idol, which is a double whammy. It's an idol of an Asherah, and places it in the Beit HaMikdash. And should we happen for a moment to forget what that Beit HaMikdash is, Yirmiyahu reminds us and tells us it's the place that Hashem told David and Shlomo that in this spot, Hashem has chosen of all of the places on planet Earth and actually in the entire universe where his name will be, meaning that that's the greatest concentration of the Shekhinah, and that Bedafka is where Menashe places this pesel. So I'm going to read something to you. I don't have it on the screen because I just found it just before class. Malbim says like this. After all these other things, the Ov, the Idoni, planting Asherah tree, the Mizbachot, the Bamot, he even added insult to injury, did worse, and he made a semel. What's a semel? Well, you know, modern Hebrew, it's a symbol, it's a sign, a symbol. Shu pesel shel dalet surot. It's an idol with four, not fashions, four, I don't want to say facets.
Images?
Images, thank you. 4 images. Kamo shamu chachamenu zichronam livracha, as our Chazal told us in Sanhedrin, liyot mechaven keneged daled. He had 4 sides to this pesel, to this particular idol, to connect to be related to 4 things. The chayot hanosot et hakiseh, the 4 chayot that would carry the chariot. What is the seat? The kiseh hakavod. Ze lu'umad ze, 1 for 1, meaning he decides to make a 4-sided, 4-imaged pesel that correlates to the opposite of what was to hold up the kisei hakavod that were in the heavens. What were they? Lest you should make a pesel, an idol, tmunat kol semel, or any form of representation. And he came up and he used 4 items. Tavnit behema, an image of an animal. Tavnit tzipor, an image of a bird. Tavnit dag, an image of a fish. Tavnit remes, and an image of a bug. Why? Shahem hachai, the one is a living creature, like an animal. Hameofef, a flying one. Vasoche, a swimming one. Vachai b'mayim uviyabasha. These all represented the different levels of creation, let's say. Now, what does this remind you of, if anything? Does this remind you of anything? We kind of have to go back a little bit. It's a bit of a stretch, perhaps. It has to do with a Dvar Torah I gave. I think I said it here also. So it would remind you if I never said it. So let me tell it to you, and then we'll connect. We'll connect the dots. We just finished, it seems like a year ago to me, but we just finished Pesach just over a week ago. And just over 2 weeks ago, last night, we sat at the Seder, and we said we read them the names of the Makot, Dam, Sardea, Kinim, and at the end of it, we said the famous line, Rabbi Yehuda haya noten bahem simanim, tetzach adash biachav. And I posed the question, do we need a Tana, a man from the time period of the Mishnah, to give us a mnemonic, a memory aid, to remember the 10 plagues? Any child who grows up with even a halfway Jewish education, and any adult who starts to learn about Haggadah later in life, and they learn the Makot, it's 10 words, Do we really need to have a memory aid? There's plenty of other things that we need memory aids for. So the Maharal points out that if you look at the groupings, Tetzach, Adash, Be'achav, they represent three different locations: below the earth, on the earth, and in the sky, or above the earth and in the sky. Because Paro said, who is this God that I should know him? He himself claimed that he was the God of the heaven, God of the earth, and God of the water, and below the earth. So Keneged, representing each one of those three, Hashem gives, Rabbi Yehuda gives us a reminder that Hashem's smacking the Egyptians with these plagues wasn't just stam, but it's also look at where they came from, meaning each plague, and it was to eradicate in the mind and to disabuse Paro, thinking that he was the deity over which these he had power. The similar idea you see here when we see that the purpose, according to the Malbim, of building this pesel with different images and specifically four sides was to like the for those of you familiar, I grew up with Superman comic books, Bizarro world, like right. It's the opposite. And instead of the Kisei Kavod and the animals that held up the Kisei Kavod, he was doing this as an additional abomination. That's the opinion of the Malbim. Okay, let's move on to let me see. Yeah, next pasuk. Chet. See, but there's a problem. There's a problem that raises itself. His next pasuk. Hashem made some promises to Am Yisrael. And that is that basically he's not going to toss us out of the land. He's not going to wipe us out. So that issue is addressed right here. Pasuk Chet, number 8. V'lo osif lahanid regel Yisrael. I will not continue to cause the foot of Israel to move, meaning that min hadama means he's not going to take the Jews out of Israel. Asher natati lavotam rak on one condition. Im yishmeru la'asot kechol asher tzivitim. As long as you follow Torah and mitzvot, you are allowed to stay in Israel. We're talking about as a nation. When a person leaves Israel, decides to make yiridah, decides that their aliyah isn't working out and return to Chutz La'aretz, is not necessarily because of something like this. We're talking about, and I mean, say, oh, he didn't keep Torah and mitzvot, therefore he's no longer in Israel. I've actually heard that. I don't, because then you're presupposing you know what God knows and thinks. It's like when there's a typhoon and someone says, oh, it's because some woman in Mea Shearim was showing a thread of hair. That's why Hashem did it. It's always blame the women, by the way. But here we're being told that as a nation, we will not be thrown out of this country as long as we keep Torah mitzvot. We don't keep Torah mitzvot as a nation. That's a big problem. So what's the result? Tet. Sorry. Let me look at one slide first before we move on. This one here. V'lo osif lehanid. Hu af yada shemikiyum davar zeh talui atid she'erit Yisrael. He also understood. Even Menashe understood and knew that the future of the Bnei Yisrael depended on keeping Torah mitzvot. B'chol zot asa lehefech. Nevertheless, he still did the opposite. Lahachis, to anger God. Mizeh shenemar la'avtacha b'lashon shlilit. Let me see shlilit, where he says the promise is said in a negative way. Lo osif lahanid. I will not continue to cause the movement of the Jew. Hochacha shekavana lo la'avtachot be'avar harachok. Wasn't meant to be an assurance of the distant past. El lamashu uftach benevuat Yishayahu al hatzalah she'erit Yisrael. Menashe zilzel begalui behaftachot elu. Hashem said, the Navi is telling us that Menashe degraded, derided, mazalzel openly these haftachot of Hashem, these promises of God, which were just keep Torah mitzvot, you're going to be fine. In the present, he's told us. This zilzul, this derision of the promise of Hashem was what caused, therefore, the cancellation of this promise. And he is considered the most responsible and guilty for the Jews going into Galut. Now, remember, we still have a few more kings to go. We still have a few more years to go in history here. Yet, everything starts to turn at this point. Take a look back at the text, please. I just want to go back to see what's the next one here. Right, okay. Tov. Pasuk Tet. Velo shamu, and they didn't listen. Vayat'im Menashe lasot et hara. Menashe made them or twisted them, caused them to do evil. Min hagoyim asher yishbid Hashem mipnei bnei Yisrael. I want to read to you again from the Dath Mikra commentary, which you don't have on your screen. Let's read the one sentence. When it says velo shamu, they didn't listen. There's another. Your text may say lo shameu. There's different. Seem to be different girsaot. Velo kiblu rov bnei Yisrael azharotehem v'tochachotehem shel hanavim. You might think that, look, okay, so Menashe was way off the derech, and he got a bunch of Jews also. But come on, I can't believe that a lot of Jews were like this. He says that a large percentage, rov, majority of the Jews, did not accept and listen to the warnings and the rebuke of the Nevi'im. They didn't stop. It's not like the Nevi'im came, as we saw, for example, Chavakuk and Nahum came along and said, you guys are bad, naughty, naughty, and then they left. It was constant. Even though by continuing to do these terrible sins, they were putting their lives in danger. Either they didn't know that they're going to die or not. They knew full well that if they didn't keep Torah mitzvot as an am, that their lives were in danger of lefachot galut. Okay, let's take a look at the next pasuk, pasuk Yud. And we saw last week that the Navi here, Yirmiyahu, and the three Nevi'im themselves, Nahum, Chavakuk, not three, the two Nevi'im, Nahum and Chavakuk, who gave prophecy during this time period. In their books, it does not mention Menashe's name, and here it doesn't mention Nahum and Chavakuk's name, because we don't want to have a connection between the names of good Nevi'im and the worst of worst kings. Yud Aleph. What did the Nevi'im say? Yan asher asa Menashe melech Yehuda to'ivot ha'ele. Because Menashe, king of Yehuda, did these horrible abominations. Heira mikol asher hasu Amori asher lefanav. He did evil, horrible things, worse than all that what the Amorites had done before him. Vayachti gam et Yehuda begilulav, and he also caused Yehuda to sin with their gilulim. Again, remember it says the word galal, dung, but referring to their idols. Lachen, therefore, in this pasuk Yud Bet and pasuk Yud Gimel and pasuk Yud Daled is the nail. I don't even say it, but it's the decree against Yerushalayim and decree against Beit HaMikdash. I'm going to look at a couple things on this too in a minute. Therefore, Hashem of Israel, God of Israel, says, I'm going to bring evil upon Yerushalayim and Yehuda. We're going to see why he says both and why he uses the word evil. Whoever hears what happens, and we're talking about the eventual Churban, his ears will burn. Yud Gimel. I'm going to read all three psukim. We're going to go back to a couple points. V'natiti al Yerushalayim et kav Shomron, and I will place on Yerushalayim the kav Shomron. Literally means the line of the Shomron. We're going to see in a minute what that means. V'et mishkolet beit Achav, and the plumb, Plumb, like the weight of Beit Achav. Again, we're going to see what that means. Umachiti et Yerushalayim, and I'm going to wipe out Jerusalem. As a plate is wiped off, and turned over on its face. I will forsake the remnants of my people, and I will place them in the hands of their enemies. They'll be for a form of derision, and they will be sacked and taken, and much of their stuff will be taken from them by their enemies. Okay. Not a very, very happy couple psukim at all. I'm curious. This is more of a rhetorical question. No need to answer, but you can if you want. Sorry, 1 second. On the night of Tisha B'Av, you go into Shul. The lights are perhaps dimmer. The parochet has been moved aside or removed altogether. People are sitting on the chair, on the side of the chair, on the floor. Echa is red. Kinot are red. And the mood is very somber. It's very sad. We know how this ends. Once again, we know that 24 hours later, we're going to be done. The fast is over. At least this year, it's going to be with Aryeh supplying all of us some really good food on Har HaBayit. But it hasn't been for a couple thousand years now, almost. But we know, okay, and then a few days later, it's Tu B'Av, we move on, boy, boom, there's this Chodesh HaGadol, yada, yada, yada. I'm mentioning this, it's not even a question, it's more of a statement, because once again, we know how the story plays out. We know how the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, and we know that the second one is because of Sinat Chinam, and the first is because of the 3 terrible sins. Now we know a little bit more about that, and we're going to have to discuss that at length as we get further into the book. It's close to the end of Sefer Melachim. But I think it's really important, and that's why I want to pause here for a second as we learn Sefer Melachim. Here we are at the end of Nisan. Now it's Rosh Chodesh tonight, starting tonight, a couple of days of Iyar, Aleph Yud Yud Reish, Ani Hashem Rofecha. So we still have Iyar, Tammuz, Av. We still have 3 months until Tisha B'Av.
Iyar is also the initials of Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. And you have Yom Ha'atzmaut in Iyar, and you have Yom Yerushalayim in Iyar.
Very nice.
The beginning and the end of the month.
Very nice. Very good.
I think that was That's from
Thank you.
Chernovsky in Torah Tidbits a few years ago.
Cool.
But he was
I like
the editor of Torah Tidbits still.
Thank you for mentioning that.
You're welcome.
So here we are, and we're in the thick of things right now. And the way that we're learning this, we will likely have finished Sefer Melachim and possibly already be in the beginning of Megillat Echa around that time period when we get to this time of Tisha B'Av. But I want you to start to think already that if we do get to the 3 weeks and we do get to the 9 days and we do get to Tisha B'Av and things haven't changed, God forbid, and we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, Chas v'Shalom, this is where it began. This is where the whole downfall begins. Yes, there have been very bad things before this in Sefer Melachim. There have been bad kings. There have been bad actions by them. But the whole declaration or decree that the end is coming, in spite of the fact there's going to be some good times after this again, is this 3 psukim in this parak. So that when you get to Erev Tisha B'Av, and again, God forbid if we do have it once again this year, and it will be Tisha B'Av, but the question is, will it be good or not? I want you to think back to this. I want you to bring this, not the physical book, but this idea, this emotion, this thought into Tisha B'Av with you this year. Hopefully as just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how far we've come now. Look at what we have. We have this beautiful brand new Beit HaMikdash. So let's take a, yes.
You say we know what's going to happen 25 hours after Tisha B'Av. It's over, we go on vacation. Yes, unlimited amounts we're allowed to go up to Har HaBayit. But to go up there, even the police are having a good day, they say, leave your Sidurim here. They can look, they'll look behind their backs if you have on your phone, but to walk with a Sidur there, or a talis, tefillin, whatever, we can't do it.
Correct.
And if you go up there, Har HaBayit is in ruins.
Correct. Har HaBayit eino bi'adeinu. That's for sure. For sure not. We are living these psukim. We're living it in a microcosmic way, because Baruch Hashem, you look all around and you look at Yerushalayim, you look at the country, it's Not that it's been turned upside down. It's not been wiped out, God forbid. But when you look at Har HaBayit and you read Eicha, as we will, whether we're going to learn it as historical or as contemporaneous to the time of the reading of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, either way, much of that, unfortunately, look at Har HaBayit, we still see. And by the way, over 2,000 years ago was our own fault, and in the year 70 of that it was our own fault, and today it's our own fault. But that's enough. Yes. Yeah, for a few minutes. For a few minutes.
Hours,
right.
Until
That was
Dayan.
Oh, here, take the key. Have a nice day, Mr. Waqf.
Right, that's right.
Yimach Shemo for the Waqf, not for Dayan.
And
you don't
the
say that to another Jew.
couldn't believe their luck because they were expecting us to blow the Misgad up.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so let's take a look at the following. Okay, first is a little intro. Gzerat HaChurban. Because of the sin of Menashe, destruction was also decreed on the land of Yehuda. The Churban, you should ask yourself, like, hey, why didn't Hashem just destroy Beit HaMikdash and everything now? It should have come now. Ulam, Maaseh Tshuva shonim ziku et Yisrael bechapara zmanit v'hatzalot zmaniot. There was a temporary reprieve because of some who had done tshuva. And again, we'll see later at some other point that even Menashe, which is going to mention it, did a somewhat of a tshuva. That's his next sentence. He did a little bit of a tshuva. So that saved them for a little. Yishayahu nechdo chazar b'tshuva shlema, and Yishayahu, his grandson, did a complete tshuva. Zo'ayta zchut gdola lo b'Yisrael. His tshuva was a tremendous...
Yoshiyahu, the king, not Yeshayahu, the prophet.
Yoshiyahu.
Yoshiyahu, not Yeshayahu.
I said Yeshayahu. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu, Josiah in English.
Right, not Isaiah.
Right, not Isaiah, right. His act of tshuva stood as a great zechut for Am Yisrael. Aval gzeira rishona nishara bimkoma. But Hashem's initial decree remained, which was the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and the removal of Am Yisrael. You take a look at Pasuk Yud Bet, which we saw. It says, "Hineni mevi ra'a al Yerushalayim v'Yehuda." This is from the Dat Mikra. It says as follows: "V'zot mipnei shayu ka'amur shutafim lema'asav v'lo michu bi'adam." Why? Because everyone was somehow, one way or another, involved in these sins. Not just the kingdom or the king, but the people of Yehuda, the whole area of Yehuda and Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim v'Yehuda, al anshe mamlechet Yehuda, Yoshvei Yerushalayim. Both on the kingdom of Yehuda and also those who lived in Yerushalayim. Uba kan lashon ra'a keneged hara'a shasu Menashe v'Yehuda. If you take a look at the words, and we saw it before at least a couple of times that usually he did the ra'ah, he did ra'ah. So too the midah keneged midah is that he's going to bring ra'ah, Yerushalayim, and Yehuda. Now, just as an aside, one of my pet peeves in Hebrew is the mispronunciation of certain words, and that is this. It's not ve-Yehuda. You can't say ve-Yehuda, just like you can't say ve-le-Yerushalayim. There's no such thing. It changes the two shva naz in a row to a chivik, an e. So it becomes vihuda. That's why you'll notice under the yud there's no shva. It's vihuda. Okay, enough pontificating about the idea of language. Okay, now we're going to take a look here. I'm going to leave you with a question. I'm not going to continue. I'm not going to read this particular commentary. I'm going to mention it because it comes into a machloket as to what these words mean. So I'm going to give you a general idea. I'm going to leave it open. These two usages of words, the kav shomron and the mishkolet, both happen to be tools of building. Just take my word for it right now. They both have to do with tools of building. And in this pasuk of destruction of the city of Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash, in the metaphorical sense, when Hashem is telling them what's going to happen, he uses two words that are trade tools of builders. Question is why? What's the message here? So I'm just going to give you the two opinions, and we'll see it more in depth next week. On the one hand, it's already a sense of hope that even though Hashem is talking about the destruction of the city, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the hope that's already built into that statement is the concept of rebuilding, because it therefore uses those two terminologies. The other side of the coin, which is the Dat Mikra, that was the Dat Sofrim and many others. The Dat Mikra is a different perspective, which we're going to look at next week. He says basically exactly the opposite. Next week, we're going to learn more about Menashe, the downfall of Menashe, his son coming to power, and his death. Hopefully, we'll finish up Perek Kaf Aleph next week and move on from there. Zeu. For those of you who are in the Kuzari class, I just want to reiterate that we're going to move to Tuesday evening from Wednesday morning. Tuesday evening, just this week, will be a shortened class because of Yom Zikaron. We're going to go 7 to 7:30 and break Marav and whatever else you're going to do at that point for Yom Zikaron. And then we'll be on track for regular Tuesday nights, Bezrat Hashem, at probably 7 o'clock. I'll let everyone know. In the meantime, I wish everyone a Shavua Tov, a Chodesh Tov. It should be a Chodesh Mevorach and a Chodesh in which we really do see, and not just it's a nice thing to say, but for real, that we'll be able to celebrate this month Pesach Sheni and bring Korban Pesach. We have a lot of sheep in our Vadi we can all choose from, and let's hope we be doing that. All right. Shavua Tov.
Amen.